What is good, everybody? Welcome back to yet another episode of Talking Hoops with Kev Luke. Back at it again today, man. Monday, February 19th. As always, I hope all you guys are doing great out there. Hopefully, all you guys are doing well, staying safe, staying blessed, all those things. We're going to get right into it, man. Today, I got a very good friend of mine. I met through the Twitter sphere. People call it X nowadays. I don't really call it X. It's still Twitter to me. But I got my guy, Dave, man. Dave, welcome to the show, man. Please introduce yourself, plug yourself, and we're gonna get right to it.
Yeah, it's definitely like you say before we got the chance to chat a bit before we got going here, Kev. But it's a pleasure as always. I've been trying to keep up with these pods as much as I can. You do an awesome job, breaking down the game from a true fan's perspective. Like you say there, my platform in terms of at Iowa Hoops Dave is pretty much only on there on X/Twitter. So if anyone wants to follow along, obviously I'm a just general basketball fan as well, on top of Iowa and my Milwaukee Bucks. But yeah, certainly appreciate that. And anyone's DMs are always open if anyone wants to collab on a more personal level beyond that, for sure.
Yeah, man, I appreciate my guy Dave just because people always tune into the national media when it comes to college basketball, and I guess rightfully so, right? They're the big brands and whatever, but it's always good to see the local fans talk about their teams because they always have that in-depth perspective. And Dave is, in my opinion, one of the best when it comes to Iowa hoops for sure. And so, getting right into it, man. I gotta ask you because people are always talking about our conference. The Big Ten hasn't won, and blah 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 blah, and the Big Ten is mid and whatever. I could say that a lot about literally any conference in the country, but I gotta ask you how you felt about the conference as a whole. And then last week we had the breaking news on Valentine's Day where Ohio State fired Chris Holtman. So, how are you feeling about just how the conference has been this year up until this point? Again, February 19th, and then we'll talk about Chris Holtman and Ohio State after.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of get going with the conference as a whole, like you said, there, Kev, I was talking with my friend who, actually covers Iowa for 24/7 Sports. And, this is a really complex question because, like you say, I mean, the Big Ten is obviously one of the most polarizing leagues pretty much every season, right? And, it's especially, last few seasons, just due to tournament success, felt like, the shtick that they kind of get, the slander, it's picked up in recent times. But, unfortunately, probably not going to see quite as many bids this year at the end of the day. But, regardless, I think it's been a solid league for sure. Obviously, it feels like a lot of seasons we have, kind of that one team. And obviously that's going to be Purdue this season. But, obviously with yourself being a Michigan State fan, I would be feeling, really good compared to, where you're at right now, even if, maybe some things have felt disappointing given preseason expectations. But obviously, at the end of the day, it's a league with, a lot of quality teams, a lot of great home court advantages. And I mean, teams just flat out beating up on each other, right? At the end of the day, especially with, like you say, just, especially like Nebraska is one that really comes to mind for me, as well as Northwestern. I mean, those teams are just absolutely unreal, when you look at their home and away differential, right? So, at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see if, the conference can kind of, get over some of that stick, like you were mentioning of, how it's just performed in March. But, I think regardless of the end of the day, the league's in a good spot for sure. And I'm interested to see how things pan out from there.
Now, I agree with you, man. I feel like it's so crazy because I mean, this is just foreshadowing, but Rutgers has the number one recruiting class in the country coming in next year, right? I know they're kind of having a down year. They lost a couple good players last year: Cam Spencer, Caleb O'Connell. You look at Minnesota. Minnesota is competing for the first time in a few seasons, right? You mentioned Northwestern. Boo Booey has done a crazy job. Chris Collins, I give him a lot of credit. The conference is just it's better than advertised, but at the same time, I know that like the average fan will never give it the same appreciation. But at the end of the day, it's still a Power Five conference, right? And in my opinion, people keep saying it. It's really no bottom. Like Michigan and Ohio State are probably the worst, but we seen Michigan just beat Wisconsin. Ohio State just beat Purdue yesterday, right? So it's like
Exactly.
it's a crazy spot that we're in, and a lot of people don't really know how to handle seeing. I think Mike Rhodes is going to get Penn State rolling in a few seasons. You just got to give him time. So to me, man, the Big Ten has always been good. Yes, we haven't won a natty since we did it with Mateen Cleaves, but it's not easy to win a national championship. People, it's hard to win 6 games in a row like that. I can make the case it's one of the hardest championships to win in all the sports, if I'm being honest with you guys. But I got to ask you about Ohio State
Yeah.
because, as I mentioned, They got Chris Holtmann out of there. A lot of people were kind of frustrated with them. Obviously, last season was horrendous. They had a terrible season, had a lot of roster turnover, had a lot of freshmen, had Bryce Sensabaugh who's now in the NBA. Then you come into this year, you're kind of expecting a jump from Bruce Thornton, Roddy Gale. And before we even get into March, the Buckeyes athletic director just says, Chris Holtmann, you got to go. And of course, again, as I just mentioned, they beat Purdue yesterday with the interim head coach and Diebler. Just talk to me about the current state of Ohio State, and if you have any good coaching candidates out there. I've heard a few we'll get into, but just talk to me about how you felt about Chris Holtmann's tenure at Ohio State and why you think they fired him.
Yeah, like you say there, I mean, it's been a couple rough seasons for Ohio State for sure. And I mean, with as much, resources as that school, that athletic department has at their disposal, I mean, you're always gonna, have some pretty, lofty expectations, even if, the basketball program hasn't, necessarily been reaching those heights as maybe like, the earlier or later 2010s, earlier 2010s, later 2000s, like you say there. But, it feels like when you go back to that COVID season, Kev, that's kind of when Ohio State, really kind of missed their chance to kind of have a turning point there with, obviously losing in the round of 64 to Oral Roberts. I'm sure that's going to haunt a lot of their diehards for a long time, and it probably would for me too. But, like you say, it's like just kind of to circle back, really, it's a program, an athletic department with a ton of NIL resources, a ton of huge donors, even if, it's a football school at the end of the day. And, I have to really, respect them for kind of, riding the ship. I mean, I just made the, simple point that getting that win over Purdue on Saturday, or no, it was yesterday, actually.
Yep.
That's just so massive, just kind of for the momentum of things going forward, and, just the chance that, they can continue to, get things going there. Obviously, I'm sure some people want to point that to Purdue's own wrongdoing, right? Which I'm sure we'll get into at some point here. But, I think that, they deserve a lot of respect. I love seeing Jamison Battle get his game off the way he did in that game yesterday. And, like you say, no doubt, it's definitely an interesting roster. But at the end of the day, gosh, it's just such a brutal league, man. No nights off for sure.
I agree. And I think that point about the Oral Roberts game is the most valid point. I think, again, that was like kind of the tipping point in a sense, just because you had a great opportunity, right? You were a 2 seed, you lose to a 15 seed. I know Max Asmus went crazy that year, but at the same time, you had opportunity. Dwayne Washington was spectacular that year, right? And to go out in that fashion, I know, again, Ohio State fans are kind of spoiled because of their football program, so I assume they expect greatness in every other, athletic department. But at the same time, like, basketball is difficult. And Holtmann, shout out to my guy Michael Lofton. He's a Butler fan, and he told me years ago, like, Holtmann just wasn't a fit there. He just wasn't the guy. And I kind of seen it, but I feel like he could also make it work, just because, again, the expectations are high, but they're not sky high. Like, they're not through the roof high. But I've heard a lot of good coaching candidates. I've heard Greg McDermott. I've heard Sean Miller. I've heard Lamont Paris. I don't really think you can go wrong with any of those guys, to be honest, because as you said, they have the NIL, they got the donors, they get the support. You're in Ohio, you're in the Midwest, you got a whole bunch of different, avenues you could take recruiting wise. So we'll see where they go. I'm sure we'll get some updates within the next few weeks. But you spoke about Purdue, and I haven't talked too much about Purdue on my show this year, just because they're kind of like our arch nemesis, being a Michigan State fan. So it's kind of like, I give them credit because I do like Matt Painter. I will say that. I want to put that on wax too. Like, I do respect Matt Painter just as much as any coach in the Big Ten and in the country, just because I feel like when it comes to X's and O's, he does a great job with that, right? He knows how to get guys, recruit guys that fit into his system. He loves these 7-3 guys. Zach Edey just happens to be the best of them. And I mean, what they've done these past couple regular seasons, they've been absolutely dominant. So I know they lost yesterday, as we both just mentioned, but how you feel about Purdue? Do you think they could get that monkey off their back and finally make a deep tournament run? You think this is the year with Braden, with Zach? You think they could finally break through?
I think, well, here's the thing, like they definitely have a great opportunity. And, I talked about it with my friend Sean Bach, like I say, who covers Iowa for 24/7, kind of leading up to that game, obviously, the magnitude that, hosting them here is going to be, right. But, just getting the chance to, really break down where they've gone. I mean, you have to talk about, Braden Smith's, ascendance this season, because I think it's probably fair to say that, in my opinion, well, I guess it's debatable, but I think he's probably their biggest, kind of just variable in terms of how they're going to be able to get on in that point time in the season. Because I mean, it just kind of felt like last year, you obviously had Edie getting his, and the same definitely applies this season. But it just felt really unpredictable, Kev, what you were going to get between Smith and Lawyer last season on a nightly basis, right? But Smith's ascendance this season is definitely what makes me feel like they have a chance. Obviously, like I feel like getting Lance Jones has definitely been huge for their team as well. But he has to be on. Like they both have to be on, when the time comes to, get that chance. Because something I was talking about with one of my friends as well is that it feels like, the quality of, like 8 and 9 seeds have really been, just improving throughout recent times with the parity in the sport. And, that's obviously just not going to give them any breaks for sure. So I think, and, part of like when you talk about Purdue is, like you say, those lofty expectations, and especially on top of losing to double digit seeds like 3 seasons in a row now, it's obviously gonna just bear a lot on their like you say, just their standard. Because I mean, if they make it to the Sweet 16, which feels like really realistic, and they go out to a obviously a really good team, but not a 1 seed at the end of the day, it's like, how do you not view that as kind of disappointing from their own perspective? But I think at the end of the day, they're definitely going to have that opportunity. And I mean, I don't know how you necessarily feel, but I personally don't like, I feel like Zach Edey's fairly kind of treated unfairly at times. But I think a lot of people need to appreciate, what he has done compared to, what he won't do. And I think it's funny because a lot of people don't realize how high his NBA stock has gotten to this point, which is, really blown my mind in all honesty. But just to kind of, make the final point, I think Purdue has a great opportunity in front of them for sure. But I mean, at the same time, like you say, it feels like they have to almost make like the Elite Eight to feel like, they truly kind of righted the ship with everything that's happened in recent time.
I agree again, bro. Just because as you mentioned, Zach Edey has not had that tournament success. The year they got close, they got to the Elite Eight, they lost to St. Peter's. They were on the brink of the Final Four, right? They were right there. Or I believe that might have been the Sweet 16. I want to say it was Sweet 16.
Yeah, Sweet
And
16.
yeah, they were right there, right? St. Peter's obviously was a Cinderella year. They went and beat Kentucky, right? Did what they were supposed to do for the most part. But I just feel like they were right there. And so for Edey to get that full credit that I think he should already get, as you said, I agree. I think he's already cemented himself as an all-time great in that program. I think he broke the record, the rebounding record, like a couple days ago, or in that game yesterday. I want to say he's cemented in my eyes. But I think having that run would just be like, okay, you get that run, you're good. The key to me, though, I think because for the most part, you know what you're going to get out of Edey, and you know what you're going to get out of Braden Smith. Fletcher Lawyer has not been that good recently, which is kind of a concern for me. Lance Jones has kind of been consistent, but I think you need one of those wings to step up between Mason Gillis, Ethan Morton, and Caleb First. And those guys really don't play as much as they should. Or Mason Gillis plays probably the most, I want to say, out of those guys.
Yeah.
But I think those guys, one of those guys has to step up. Like they just have to, in my opinion, because again, you know what you're going to get from your point guard. You know what you're going to get from Edey every game. Lance Jones is consistent for the most part on defense. He'll give you life here on offense, but one of those wings has to, just because it feels like they're not necessarily bland, I want to say, but they're just one dimensional, right? And this is the thing that rattles me with them, is that one thing Painter's always been known for is having knockdown shooters. And I feel like he hasn't had that knockdown guy in a couple years now. Like last year, Fletcher was really good, but I look at Fletcher more of a scorer, right? You've had Carson Edwards, you've had Grady Eifert, you've had a whole bunch of snipers go through there. And I feel like Edey never has played with a dead eye shooter like that. And I feel like that's always been a big time thing with me. So it's weird to me, but we'll see. I am rooting for them just because I do root for the Big Ten. I'm not a champion of the Big Ten like my guys Sleepers Network are, but I do root for the Big Ten in the tournament quietly. I don't say it out loud too much, but I do. Even if it's Michigan, who I know they're not sniffing the tournament this year, but when they are there, I do root for them a little bit. But
yeah,
let's get into your Hawkeye. Go ahead.
For sure. Or I was just gonna add, even just having like a Stefanovic, on top of their roster this year, that would be just such a game changer for them without a doubt.
No, I agree 100%, man. And it's kind of shocking to me that nobody's really brought that up, because again, that's been a staple of what Painter does. He runs shooters off all these crazy actions, kind of like Fran does in a sense. and they just knock down shots. And if it's a miss, then you got Edie to clean it up every single time for the most part. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm hoping they do something this year because not only do they need it, but the Big Ten as a whole probably needs it more than anything. But get into your Hawkeyes, man, because that's what we're here for, right? Your Iowa Hawkeyes. So far into this season, how would you summarize their play this part of the season? Because we do match up tomorrow at the Breslin Center. That's why we're here. But just how would you, again, summarize your squad so far this season on February 19th?
Yeah, I mean, at this point in the year, despite some of the lows that, the program and has kind of, been experiencing compared to where we've been, for the better part of, I mean, the last 5 seasons now, right? Which is, I think, really saying, something considering the, just kind of general run that we've had. Despite that, I mean, we haven't really had, any, I mean, huge like valleys in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, like last season, he had a brutal quad 4 loss to Eastern Illinois, but, we're undefeated there. We had a couple of, at the time, quad 3 losses this season, but they've all, moved up, especially with kind of Maryland's ascendance in recent time. I mean, just sort of on top of that as well, it feels like, we haven't hit as many, peaks, obviously, at the same time as well, obviously. And I'd say that I feel like I'm being a little overly critical, maybe coming off, the first quad 1 win of the season on Saturday against Wisconsin. But, just kind of, given where we're at, and like I say, the fact that we still have as much to play for at this point in the year, I think is a good testament to, just the overall job that we've done. And, I think some people would mention that, they've kind of maybe missed like opportunities at times. And there definitely, has been that, given, whether you want to say close losses or a couple of games that we should have won that we weren't able to pull out in the end. And, on top of that, we kind of do have a absolutely brutal, few games to close out the year here. But, just like I was saying, we were talking about it before we got, recording here briefly. The fact that, no matter how the season kind of pans out, there's going to be, a lot of good, optimistic things to take us with going forward, especially with, like you say, Fran today, pretty much cementing that, he's not going to be, quote, retiring anytime soon. Right. So I love that for our guys. And I mean, just want to, I'm going to, some people, like I say, going back to, the schedule thing, they're going to view that as, something scary, something that is going to, not necessarily pan out well, be apathetic. But, I want to view it as a great opportunity, no matter what the results may bring.
Yeah, man, I'm looking at it right here. You guys lost your top 2 scorers from last year, right? You lost Chris, you lost Philip Rabracha, you lost Connor McCaffrey too, right?
Exactly.
And
I'm sure what Connor was bringing to those teams as well, especially the last couple of seasons.
exactly. So again, as you said, for y'all to still be playing for something at this point in time, like, I mean, let's be honest, most people in the national media and just in general that cover the Big Ten didn't really have you guys doing anything, right? And you're still competing. And, big salute to Tony Perkins. Had a big time game the other day versus Wisconsin. That's what I really want to ask you about next. But, he's really, he kind of struggled in that first half. I believe he got into foul trouble, had to sit out for a little bit. And you had Brock come in and give you some good minutes and ended up going to overtime and beating the Badgers. I know the Badgers been reeling recently, but nonetheless, to me, I was very high on Wisconsin going into the year. I still am. I know they're in a downward spiral, what it looks like right now, but I think they'll bounce back, hopefully. But just what were your main takeaways from that game? Because it was a really fun game Saturday in Carver Hawkeye Arena.
Yeah, I mean, like you say there, with being, kind of the young team that we are, it is feel a little, bad to say that, there was kind of some, things that, what I'm saying, like negatives that you could take away at the same time on top of obviously the good stuff. Because I mean, there was definitely a period, especially like the first 10 minutes of the game where, defense for us was not where it needed to be. And at the same time, sort of at the flip side of it, they definitely didn't protect that lead as much as maybe would have liked, because I was reading up earlier from my friend, in the final like 7 minutes, Iowa was, I think, 2 of 10 from the field, while Wisconsin was 3 of 6 from the field in the last 3 minutes. Right. So, you kind of didn't want that game to go to overtime from our perspective, but, obviously good that, they were able to string a couple of stops together despite, going down 4 in the first like minute of overtime as well on top of that. But, just simply put, it was good to see that, we won the rebounding battle there. That's felt like something that, really has had a long way to go for us throughout the season, but it was great to, see it, and be able to stay in the game. That's really been like the only thing preventing him from producing at the consistent consistent basis that he has been able to for the most part. And like you mentioned, Brock, it was great to see the juice he kind of brought to us in the first half there. I think that could really be a turning point for him to, really solidify, a defined role with us. And obviously, our main players all stepped up. We had, let me look back here. We all had, oh gosh, of course I closed it. We had, let's see here, four guys with 17 or plus: Dix, Owen, Perkins, and Peyton Sanford, right? All contributing there. So, and I said before at the start of the season, this team would certainly be at the best when, multiple guys were contributing, kind of on a balanced basis. And that's the type of stuff I certainly want to see going forward.
I agree. We'll talk about it in a second, but that's exactly what my Spartans have been needing. Just our top four guys to just be competitive consistently, right? And step up to the plate based on what we have so far this season. But I gotta ask you about Owen Freeman. It's only right because to me, when you look going back to the start of the season, everybody was talking about, Deshaun Harris Smith at Maryland. They were talking about Xavier Booker. They were talking about Dre Gibbs Lawhorn at Illinois when it comes to freshmen. Now, when we look at it, I believe he won, you would know what, his 9th Big Ten Freshman of the Week so far. I think he's only,
Yeah.
3 away from breaking Jared Sellinger's record. I think it's only about 3 weeks left in the season. So he has a chance to do it though, right? He has a chance to get right there. Which is crazy, right? And I never even knew that until I watched the game the other day because I know Jared Sellinger was a beast, but 12 times, that's very tough. But Owen, though, again, big time player coming out of Illinois, coming out the state of Illinois, and he's producing a high level average. Like, this is one thing I got to say before I let you go is that as a freshman, to average double digit points, because I see he averaged 11 points for you guys, that's hard. Even just averaging like 6 to 7 points is tough. And especially as a big man in the Big Ten, where we're notoriously known for having the best bigs in the country, I got to give Owen Freeman a lot of credit, man. So just let me ask you, did you expect this from him in year one? And how has he been for the team this year?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely been, the biggest, bright spot of the season, without a doubt, in terms of, just kind of moving forward for program momentum, if nothing else, like you say. I mean, if you asked me, at this point in the season, I would have expected him to have, that many Freshman of the Week honors. I mean, I don't know. It would have been probably hard for me to say yes, just because, how exceptional it truly has been, right? Because I think just kind of what gets taken for granted, Kev, is just the fact that, he looks like he's been, playing in the Big Ten for 2 or 3 seasons now, and especially in, like I was mentioning, the games where he's able to stay on the floor, because I think that's just kind of been, the only thing that really, glaringly comes to mind that we need to be able to improve there. But I mean, especially in the last few games against Minnesota and Wisconsin as well, he did a good job against Maryland, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, of just staying in the game. Like, just the fact that he's been able to produce on such a consistent basis for us has been unbelievable. And I mean, I think it only has to go back to the job that, Coach McCaffrey and staff have done with producing, in the post positions here in recent time.
Yeah, man. And I give him a lot of credit just because, as you mentioned, he looks like a vet, right? Watching that Wisconsin game, Steven Crowd, other than Edey, you can make a case Steven Crowd's the best big in the league, right? He's developed a lot over his tenure over there in Wisconsin, but Owen he has great patience, great footwork. He had a play where he had the dribble handoff, and then the ball handler reversed it. He set the screen, he rolled, and then he did a spin move to score the layup. Yeah. And I was like, wow. I was like, oh my God. I thought Chucky Hepburn was about to steal it from him, and he still held on to it and finished. And I was like, man, this dude right here, I'm not looking forward to matching up with him for the next few years, but he's a hooper. He just gets the job done. But the reason we're here today, man, because we play tomorrow. Again, I'll probably drop this episode tomorrow, but big time matchup for, I think, the both of our teams at this point, right? We're on a 2-game winning streak. We went to Ann Arbor this past weekend, beat Michigan. We went to Penn State, beat them. And then you guys, of course, as I just mentioned, coming off that big time win versus Wisconsin, not at Wisconsin, but versus Wisconsin. So tell me, just what do you think your biggest keys in this game are just to get the win and walk out of Breslin Center with the win?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a daunting task without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, you guys always have one of the toughest environments every year, especially at home, right? And it feels honestly unreal to, say that we actually have won 4 of the last 5 and, last 10, and, it's a 6-4 in your guys' favor, I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, that just shows to go, or excuse me, shows, just how good the games typically have been between these two programs in recent times. And but getting over to like you say, the more specific stuff. I think we don't necessarily have to blow the matchups out of the water, but especially Tony Perkins and Josh Dix have to be able to compete with T-Walk and Hogard on your guys' side. Obviously, they're one of the most experienced tandems in the league. And Walker was, I mean, absolutely having his way with us last year, especially in the game at Iowa City. He finished with like 30, I think, and shot close to like 75% from the field, I want to say. And Hogard obviously does a tremendous job of getting to the line, which is something I've always admired about him. It's funny because I would compare what he was doing like last season. I would say, if we could just get that out of Tony on a consistent basis with us, I think that would take, our team to such a great height. And I mean, obviously I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but with the load Tony's taken on this year, I think, it's almost fair to say that like he's taking on like a greater load than him, just kind of in general. I don't want to necessarily say surpass there, but obviously at the end of the day, you're not going to totally shut down Hogard and Walker, but I think we can do a decent job of limiting him there and making those positions a battle. I mean, on top of that, it kind of on a game by game basis lately, I've been really, trying to emphasize like how is Ben Krikke going to potentially be able to get his, because it's like when he's not, able to be a decent offensive cog at times, unfortunately, it feels like he's kind of a negative out there. And admittedly, like the matchup with Malik Hall likely is something that's going to be intriguing for sure, because I mean, Iowa needs to find a way to combat that, because if Hall is giving you buckets out there, I mean, we've seen how much better MSU can be. And in your home games, I want to say against Minnesota and Wisconsin, like Iowa, well, in our games, we really dug ourselves a hole, right? And I mean, one reason for that is definitely bad perimeter defense. And you guys obviously do a decent job of, shooting on opponents like that. So making 3-point defense a priority from the start is definitely going to be big for us. And simply put as well, we got to be sure to, get Peyton Sanford going when he's, operating efficiently for us. We're just a totally different team. And obviously, he brings a decent amount as well in terms of, playmaking as well. But when he's hitting shots, teams just have to defend us differently. And obviously, with, I think it's another tangent to get on, but we definitely don't have as much shooting just as we typically would in general this year. So just getting that production from him has just become that much more crucial for Iowa as a whole for sure this season.
Man, and that's always the first thing that hits my mind when we match up is that we just got to close out. We got to close. Like, I don't even necessarily think we have to run Iowa off the 3-point line, but we just can never, whatever year it is, we can never afford to have lazy closeouts, because Iowa will make you pay every single time. And even going back to last year, right? It's funny because we split, of course, we won at Breslin. Y'all had that crazy comeback at the crib. And I thought we should have won there, and I thought y'all should have won at Breslin, because I remember at the Breslin, you guys, Fran drew up, or whoever in the coaching staff drew up a great play to get a wide open 3, and they missed it. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, man, I was sweating that game. It was a crazy game, right? And then, of
Yeah,
course, I think we
sure.
were up like 13 with like 2 minutes left, and then we were like up 11 with a minute left. You guys just went ballistic from the 3-point line. Game goes to overtime, and y'all pull it off. But I think I agree, though. I think the matchup between Ben Krikke and Malik Hall, to me, is going to play a big factor into whoever wins this game. That's just what it is. As you mentioned, Malik has been playing amazing this past a little bit over a month now. I think he's finally hitting that that seniority thing that most MSU guys have. Kenny Goins went through it a couple years ago, and it's just been on and on and on. And so I think that's a big time thing. And I'm very curious to see how we play Owen, just because if I'm just being honest, our front court is our most glaring weakness, right? And every time we played the top big men in the league, we've always either trapped them or we just did a strong dig and just made them force the ball out their hands. And so I'm curious to see how they're going to play that. I think they'll probably try and double him, but I think they'll play him straight up at first with Marty. And I think slowly but surely we'll start to double him depending on how he's doing. But I think that's going to be a big time thing too. And I'll just say too is we just got to rebound. I think that's been one of our biggest weaknesses, right? Like we play good defense for the most part, but we just cannot close out the possession with the rebound for some reason. I don't know why, but that's a big time thing. I just think for you guys, it's funny that you compare AJ and Tony because I've always felt the same way, right? They're both two rugged, tough nosed PGs. I think AJ is a bigger body, so therefore he has a little bit more strength. But I think Tony, as a mid range shooter, is exactly what I love to have AJ. If AJ could get that mid range jumper down, he'd be virtually unguardable. But kind of the same player. So I think that's going to be another factor into it, just because they could potentially cancel each other out depending on which AJ you get, right? Because Saturday he got 2 fouls in the Michigan game, never was really able to establish a rhythm. And yeah, we still won, but if we want to be the best version of ourselves, people already know Michigan State's known for our point guard play, right? And AJ has to be that guy coming down the stretch, especially as a senior. And it's the same thing for Tony, right? He's averaging 15 points per game. As you said, he's carrying a much bigger offensive load. He's got to
Oh,
facilitate a little bit more. He doesn't have a Tyson Walker next to him, right? So he's making it work. And I give him a lot of credit for that, though. So I'm
yeah, for
excited for
sure.
this game, though, because I feel
Yeah,
like we played.
yeah.
It seems like we played every team except for you guys and the two Indiana schools. And I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm pretty.
no, I look at so many like, Big Ten teams you think we'd be playing like penciled in twice a year. It's crazy to me that, well, and then, you starting to get into the conversation of like, if I remember correctly, like with the expansion next year, like every team is going to be playing each other once, except for three teams that you'll play twice. Like that's just
Crazy.
unreal, man. But yeah, just the fact that they've only played as many times as they have. I mean, 5 times since the start of the COVID season just feels unreal to me, right? And yeah, like you say, it's funny because just getting on top of that stuff, it's weird to really dig into just getting like inconsistencies in scheduling. But I appreciated the point that you brought up about like you say, Hogard there in the front court, because when you really take the chance to look at how Owen's going to be able to handle that type of stuff. I mean, that's what's going to first and foremost be able to keep us in there. Because I mean, personally, I haven't gotten the chance as much watch you guys as much as I'd like in recent time, but I think with the fact that Carson Cooper kind of brings, a similar strengths to, what, like you say, with Stephen Crowell at, maybe to like a lesser extent. Right. But, I admire what he does, obviously from an athletic standpoint as well. He definitely just feels like, your guys' highest floor option at this point in time, maybe.
I agree. It's either him or Jackson. Just the thing with Kohler is that he's still working his way back from that injury, right? So it's like everybody's in mid-season, almost postseason form, and he's still kind of like in preseason form. And that's kind of like the only concern there. But I think the more he plays, though, like I've been saying, this stretch that we have before we get to the Purdue game, we should try and find some post offense, because that's been the biggest thing missing, right? To have a team that doesn't have a post option is like, it makes me want to pull my hair because we're so used to having that. And it's like, you need to establish that, right? Like you look around the Big Ten, everywhere you go, Minnesota has Dawson Garcia. Obviously, Purdue has Zach Edey. You guys have Owen, right? Wisconsin has Steven Crowd. Rutgers has Big Cliff, who I love. I wish he was on our team because he's a defensive monster. But
Oh yeah.
everybody, everybody has that low post option. Even Michigan has Como, and we're just sitting here just like, and again, I don't want to knock Marty because he's been through a lot, but it's just like, man, if we had that, it would take so much pressure off Tyson Walker having to be great, AJ Hogarth having to set the table, Jaden Akins having to knock down shots, Malik Hall having to go to that next level. But it's going to be interesting. I love the contrast and styles in this game, and
For sure.
yeah, man, I'm excited for it. I really am.
It
I can't
feels
wait for
like
it tomorrow.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
feels like we run into that kind of contrast in style, type of discussion in a lot of games for sure. Obviously, like Wisconsin's probably an even greater example of it on Sunday. It's always interesting to see, when we're forced to, get in a lot of more, half court action, or at the same time, when we kind of force, teams like you guys or them to, really have to speed up and try and, score with us when, we're on our game. That's what's just really fascinating to me. And I think, that those teams, teams don't get enough credit for how much, they can play with us, in that terms of stuff when, they're on and we're on at the same time. And I got a little off track there when, I started because I lost my train of thought, but, just going back to like what Tony's, been able to bring when you compared him and AJ, like if I was meaning to say, like, I honestly don't know, where Iowa would be this year if it wasn't for the, giant, I mean, pretty big leap that he's been able to take this year. Because, I remember when we were just sort of talking, I forget if it was just in like a, casual space or whatever, you mentioned that, it might have just been like a largely case of, Iowa was kind of just asking Tony to, do a little too much because it felt like, they were asking him to be, a primary ball handler, top 1 or 2 assist guy, and then obviously like a top 3 or 4 scoring option on top of that. I mean, that's a big load to take on for sure. And the way that, he's kind of embraced that on top of this season with having, like you say, not having Chris or Phillip around him as well, that's just been, so essential for where we're at this point in time. And I mean, brutally honest, if he was having like the same level of production he was having a season ago, I mean, there probably wouldn't be as much, people hoping that he's coming back for a 5th year, right? So, just I'm so proud of what he's been able to achieve this year, and I would love to see him, close his career out, whether it's this year or next year, just on a high note like he has been.
I agree, man. And it's funny because I kind of compare what he's doing this year. I think he's doing it better, in my opinion. But I compare what he's doing this year, not just to how AJ plays, but also to what Chucky Hepburn had to go through last year, right? Because Wisconsin was very young, right? Connor Seaton was a freshman. Max Klesman was a freshman. Stephen Kraut to me was good, but he was nowhere near as good as he is right now currently. And you didn't have an AJ Store. And then Tyler Wall was dealing with an injury. So he was like 50-50. You never knew what you were really going to get from him. And that's why Wisconsin struggled. But to me, again, I think Tony's done a hell of a job. Again, just being a senior, right? That's one of my favorite things too, is that obviously we know not everybody's going to go to the NBA. Not everybody's going to have a career after basketball. And I'm not saying this about Tony, but just in general, seeing the growth of guys over their 4 years, because again, he's played with a lot of talent, right? He's been around Luka Garza. He's been around the Murrays, right? And now he's taken that leadership role and he's ran with it. And he's done a phenomenal job. And again, in that Wisconsin game, to see him respond the way that he responded says a lot about his character
Oh
and
yeah.
everything about him. So I give him a lot of credit for that.
Yeah. And I mean, it just kind of comes down to like, the comment. Well, the thing it feels like we hear all the time about, how, I mean, Fran and staff, really seem to, just instill such a high level of confidence in, our players that, I mean, like I say, you just hear about it over and over. And he was talking about it. And I don't know if you saw the post game interview from that game on Saturday against them, but he was getting like emotional with Stephen Bardo. I mean, talking about his grandmother who passed away fairly recently as well. And, just he mentioned, obviously, like essentially, they told him, you had a rough first half there, but, we know that, you can do this, you can play. And they trusted him to, go out and produce the way he did in that second half for sure. And I mean, it's just really cool to, see how far he's come for sure. And he did, yeah, I guess like on top of that, he did a segment of The Journey. I don't know if you watched that on Big Ten Network and a lot, but it was a cool piece for sure. I think he's definitely a guy with a story to tell without a doubt.
And I got to ask you about Brock too. I know I didn't put it on our topics
Oh
earlier,
yeah.
but I got to ask you just because one thing that I love about the future of the Big Ten, as I kind of mentioned with Rutgers having the number 1 overall class, is the point guard play, right? Jeremy Fears, I think, is going to be a monster in a few years. Trey Holloman, we got for the next few years. You got Brock. You got Dylan Harper at Rutgers coming in next year. You got a couple other guys in different spots. But just talk to me about Brock Hardy, man, because, again, he played with Owen in high school. They had a lot of success in the state of Illinois. He had some good moments in this game versus Wisconsin. And just what do you see from him this year, and what do you think he can be in the next few years?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think anyone that's watched Iowa a lot, and I mean, I think a lot of people knew this kind of coming into the year. He kind of brings, something that no one else in our roster truly can, in the way he's able to, probe and initiate offense, as a playmaker, particularly, compared to, just really everyone else on our roster. The scoring definitely has a long way to go at this point in time, because I was looking at Bart Torvik, and, he's definitely, has a long way to go, especially especially like when you look at his numbers when he's, taking like contested shots, which, given where he kind of is at physically, I think, you can give him a bit of leeway. But, it was cool to see him. I mean, knock down a three on Saturday against Wisconsin. He had a kind of like up and under move as well just before
Mhm.
halftime. That was definitely big in our comeback there. But I mean, I was looking at it the other day. I mean, he's averaging like close to oh my gosh, it was some unreal like assist number, just per like X amount of minutes. And I mean, no one else is really like truly bringing that at this point in time. And I mean, when you see him out there with Owen, especially, you see that chemistry between them because of all the roles they would have ran. And and that's the thing that gets mixed up a bit. I think it's pretty cool that Owen transferred to Brock's high school for his last season to be able to play together after they had both committed and they had kind of that relationship established. So I love to see that continue to carry over. I think he's definitely primed for hopefully a good leap next season, because I know that you've mentioned before like that freshman to sophomore year leap is probably
Yeah.
and likely in so many cases that biggest transition in terms of kind of what defines a college player. So I'm excited to see what that holds for him. And as much as I would also advocate that we need to be able to bring in another guy in the portal at that position if Tony was to leave, particularly like a 1 or 2 year guy to help develop alongside him. Right. I'm so excited for what Brock's going to be able to bring to this team in the future, because I mean, even like when you think about Jordan Bohannon, obviously he brought more as a scorer probably, and especially a shooter, but like Brock's playmaking is just at such a high upside point in time, and I'm so excited for what holds for him, especially with like the level of moxie that he carries about himself.
Nah, for sure, man. I'm very excited to see his growth, man. But before I get you out of here, I would be so wrong to not bring up the great Caitlin Clark, man. Officially last Thursday, she broke the scoring record in all of women's college basketball with a 49-point performance against Michigan at Iowa. And man, I don't even know where to start, but just how do you explain Caitlin Clark? Because I've always said like I've always loved women's college basketball more than anything, and I knew we were going to get to this point where it started to get more recognition and more love. But what she's done has been, again, something I can't even explain. So how would you explain the supernova that is Caitlin Clark?
Yeah, I mean, as an Iowan myself, Kev, I mean, it's just such an awesome story, from the fact that she's from West Des Moines originally, and has always had Iowa close to her heart, wanted to stay close to home. And I mean, when she committed here, I mean, essentially, I mean, was vowing to hopefully take Iowa to a Final Four one day, and obviously that was done last season, making it all the way to the championship game. It's going to be fun to see if they can do that again this year for sure. But I mean, she's truly like one of one. I mean, I think a simple way I can put it at this point in time is I love how I love how much of a sicko she honestly is, as good as she is at the same time, man. Because I mean, it's been said over and over, like the fact that she goes for that record breaking shot on a transition pull up from the logo. I mean, dude, that's what do I even say about that? I mean, it's unbelievable stuff. And I mean, it's so cool to me to see that, she's brought so much more, respect and eyeballs to, the women's game in general, kind of like you mentioned there for sure. And regardless of if she chooses to come back one more year here or not, she's achieved everything that you can achieve as a player. I mean, that pretty much goes without saying, in my opinion. And I'm jealous of my friend, and kind of on top of this as well, I'm so thankful that I was able to see as many of her games as in person that I was able to, because I'm sure you see now how hard it is to get tickets to their games
Man,
this season. But yeah, especially seeing their game at Kinnick, that was so awesome before this year. And game winner against Indiana, I was there as well. But yeah, just to simplifies it, man. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And the love that she's gotten from our fan base is every bit deserved. And like I was kind of talking about off camera, at the times I feel like Iowa can, the average Iowa fan can get a bit casual when it comes to winter sports in general, being more of a football school. But the way they've really gotten such an unbelievable fan base, they've been getting themselves into a little trouble almost, I see on social media at times. But what she's done for the game is just unbelievable, dude. And I'm definitely not gonna take any game, any moment she's in an Iowa jersey for granted here.
And that's what I'm saying, man. Unlike a lot of people, you literally got to witness it in person. I think you brought up a great point, being that she's from Iowa. I feel like that doesn't get talked about enough. I'm pretty sure you like obviously you're from out there, so I'm pretty sure you hear about it, or they talk about it all the time. But like from a national standpoint, staying home, like my girl Juju out here, I think that should be a major thing. That should be not necessarily like more of a pat on the back, but just like it should be recognized more. You know what I'm saying? And for her to do that again, go to a national championship game, had a great chance to win it. You knock off South Carolina, who everybody thought was the favorite to win it last year. Like she's done amazing things. Of course, she's had some great teammates too. I love Gabby Marshall. I love Monica, who left a couple or last year, I believe. Right, she's had some really good teammates as well. But she is just again, it's hard to describe her, right? Because she has the Steph Curry range. She's a really good playmaker. She can get anywhere she wants to on the floor, and she's just a dominant player, man. So,
For sure.
you know,
I think
shout
there's
out
a
to you.
genuine or I
Go
was
ahead.
just gonna say on top of that, like I think there's a genuine conversation to be had if she's, a better playmaker or shooter at this point in time. I mean, the way that she's able to, I mean, I compared it. I mean, she's like she's just like a puppeteer out there. The way she's able to, play make and just absolutely run the offense entirely through her to the level that it is, especially with, some of the, double constant, like double team and box and one looks that they're always getting. And I mean, she makes it look like it's the simplest defense she's ever faced in her life, right? And God, man, it's just unbelievable to see, and without question, this year, especially like you say, not having the Monica especially to go to, it's just been so impressive to see how she's really put that team on their back, and I mean they're in line for a 2 seed again at minimum because of
Mhm.
what she's done this year. I mean, and I mean this in no disrespect to the rest of the team, but without her, I mean, I feel like it's probably like I mean, lower seed or bubble team. You know what I'm saying? So just what they've been able to achieve this year is absolutely unbelievable, and the way that the state has really rallied around the sport of women's basketball in general, because Iowa State's definitely done some good stuff as well. Credit to them. It's just really it's cool to see. I can't lie. So I'll be interested to see if that really continues strong past this point in time, or whenever she wraps up her career here.
And I gotta say too, one thing people don't really want to talk about, and I'm gonna give her credit for this, but I don't want to make it seem like she's the only reason. But she's really made women's Big Ten basketball better, if I'm just being honest, right? Of course, you've always had Maryland be really good for the most part, but you're starting, and of course, I can't forget Rutgers, obviously, of course, but my Michigan State basketball program getting better. Shout out to Coach Fralick. You're seeing Indiana rise to the occasion. You're seeing a couple other schools. Northwestern's had a good program for a couple years now. So I got to salute her for that, because I feel like when you get greats like that, whether it be players or coaches, it just makes the rest of the conference better. And I appreciate her for that. And yeah, man, just big shout out to Caitlin Clark, man. But Dave, man, I appreciate you for taking the time. It's been an honor. It's been a privilege. We definitely got to do this more for sure. And yeah, man, I appreciate you. Just plug your social media again one more time for the people, please.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, Kev, yeah, likewise, we'd been talking about this for a while. It's definitely something overdue for sure. But yeah, like you say, the big plug for sure is just on Twitter/X. You can find me at Iowa Hoops Dave. If you want it, that's kind of, just where the platforms go, unfortunately. But if you guys want to, get into, more and further stuff, my DMs are always open. And I'm always, I'm always open to, more minds about basketball, particularly. I love, breaking down the game however I can. And yeah, I miss being able to be a direct competitor, right? So any
Man.
connections, anything like that, that's always open without a doubt.
Yes, sir, man. Again, I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. As always, it's been another episode of Talking Hoops with Kev Luke. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, share, and all those great things. Y'all have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of February. It's almost March, which sounds crazy to say, but we're here nonetheless. And as always, peace and love.